The Way of Love tells us that going is a spiritual discipline. By crossing boundaries, listening deeply, and trying to live like Jesus, we're really telling the world more about the one who sends us. I visited Honoré Farm and Mill to meet with the Reverend Elizabeth DeRuff. Some years ago, she felt a calling to go out and use her gifts to serve God, love neighbors, and take care of creation. We joined her and many friends and neighbors on their annual harvest day, where we cut and threshed their crop of wheat. The Reverend Elizabeth DeRuff, thank you for having us out here. We are in what I think is one of the most beautiful places on earth, Healdsburg.
I agree, yes, Healdsburg, Northern California.
A lot of people come here to vacation, to enjoy, farms and wineries, but we're not here to vacation today, we're here to work. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on around us? What's the project?
St. Honoré Farm and Mill really arose out of a pastoral experience that I had. This is 2003, so it was quite a while ago, and I was offering communion, and a woman whispered in my ear, she said, "I'm allergic to bread." It was so surprising to me. I'd never heard of anyone with gluten intolerance.
Right.
That wasn't a thing yet. It was concerning to me pastorally as a priest, but it also connected with my background in farming. Both of my families come from farming families from Ohio and Michigan.
Oh, wow.
I started to research what was happening to wheat and why would someone actually be allergic. And what I discovered is wheat is not what it used to be.
I see.
The way modern wheat is farmed, it's farmed with a lot of pesticides and chemicals, and it's bred for production and profitability.
Yep.
It's not bred for taste, it's not bred for working with nature. First of all, there's a lot of chemicals that are used. Second of all, it's processed in a way that strips all the nutrients away from the grain that are present in this field. We're not really eating a very nutritious crop. Wheat is not only wheat. Wheat is soil, wheat is water, wheat is air.
And what we're talking about too is kind of care of creation, that this is not just, to create a very good product, which it does, but it's actually taking into account the entire cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
Farming doesn't have to be destructive. The greenhouse gases that are produced right now that's warming up our climate, agriculture produces about 30% of those greenhouse gases, and that's from our petroleum-based chemicals. And because there's using a lot of chemicals in the soil is actually kind of inert. It loses its life.
Wow.
This wheat, all grown organically, has very deep roots, and so through photosynthesis, it brings down the carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, shuttles it through the plant into the roots, and it becomes carbon sugars, and the soil microbes eat the carbon sugars.
Wow, so that means the ground is actually healthier here than you might find in a modern field.
Oh, completely.
Which is not hard to believe because just the fertileness of this region, everything is coming forth from it.
Yeah.
It's kind of astounding to see.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. This episode of Traveling the Way of Love is kind of focused on the concept of going. And what we mean by that is crossing boundaries, listening deeply, and living like Jesus. As you were creating this ministry and working with folks here, where do you think you crossed boundaries?
So working as an agricultural chaplain, I have heard confessions from 93-year-old farmers. I've heard stories of when our super chemicals started to be used. Whole generations of the men in the family that were farming would die. I mean, I've had people tell me about that. So I think we cross boundaries working with farmers. We work with millers. We're working with sister churches in 9 different dioceses right now. So we're collecting this grain, we stone mill it, and we deliver it to churches for their communion bread.
What a cool thing.
And this kind of wheat is actually wheat that people with gluten issues can eat, not celiac.
Sure.
I think that that's fairly extraordinary that there actually is wheat that people with gluten issues enjoy.
That seems to be a boundary crossing right there.
Right there.
From the ability and inability to eat it.
That's right.
Another part of going is listening deeply. How did you listen deeply when you were beginning Honoré Farm and Mill?
When we think of our ministries, it's really important to remember that everything that we do comes out of our relationship with God.
Yeah.
It comes out of that love. Who we are is in response to love. Loving food, loving health, wanting people to share a common meal, it arose out of that experience. If we connect deeply with what we're curious about, I perceive it more as a summons.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Rather than trying to figure something out. And of course, I always love Frederick Buechner, a 20th century theologian who said, calling is where our deep delight meets the world's deep need. And in that place, we are assured that we'll meet God and we'll be given the resources we need.
Where have you found God in this ministry?
Standing in the earth, in the sense of awe that I feel. I've been on this field at 10 o'clock at night, just checking on the field and standing under a full moon. But also, as I've been talking, people have come up to me, and one woman with tears in her eyes just said, you know, I grew up on a farm and I'm so moved, and I'm not even sure why. So I think it's connecting with that mystery that connects all of us. And I think it's really important to ask ourselves as Christians, what are the practices that instill a sense of reverence for creation, a sense of reverence for our food and the land and for each other?
This is it. While I thoroughly enjoyed the hand harvesting, stacking, and threshing, Elizabeth mentioned that we don't have to start a brand new ministry, a brand new farm, to practice going on the way of love. Just like crops and plants and flowers thrive in certain environments, so do our ministries. What works well in one community might fall flat in another. By getting to know our contexts, our neighbors, and our own spiritual gifts, we're better equipped to nurture what God has planted. One of the things I love about this is that not everyone here is Episcopalian. This is probably, for some folks, the most engagement they have with a church-related ministry. And what you've done is brought them, you've shown them a little bit of that, and they came of their own accord to this place where they find meaning.
And there's a Catholic nun here, there's a Presbyterian pastor, and then you can see there's young people and there's old people.
Yeah.
And I think that bridging to crossing the boundary, right now in the Episcopal Church, we have an aging population, but those are the elders that remember the small family farms. They either grew up on them or their parents or their grandparents, and the values that go along with recognizing that food is precious and that you don't waste it.
And relationship with it.
We can be called to the land. We can be called to serve our creation in that way. And I absolutely see this ministry as serving God's creation in a real way.
As an Episcopalian, the Eucharist is so important to our worship. I mean, it's the central act of Christian worship for us. What thoughts do you have about what we're doing here today and how that relates to the Eucharist?
One of the surprising things that I learned is the question of why did Jesus choose bread and ask us to remember him?
Could have been fish.
It could have been fish.
Sure.
This idea would never have been lost on first century Christians because remember, there's no Costco's, there's no grocery stores, there's no refrigeration. So when they saw that wheat field of plenty, they knew that they would have life because a huge percentage of their diet was dependent upon these wheat seeds. And what Jesus was saying is, I am as important to you spiritually as bread is to you physically. I think we can recover that sense by the reverence that we offer at the altar for the bread and wine. But think about that reverence going all the way through the process, from the harvesting and even before the planting to the cleaning to the how it's delivered to the church. It's all a series of relationships.
And that brings us back to going, that wherever we go, we have to go with that kind of intentionality. That if we go with eyes open, hearts open to see where God is calling us, and we do it with intention, and we grow that with intention and not just start something, but really follow through in it, then I think we've done a great service to God and to ourselves and to our neighbors and to the earth.
We can inspire the church to really bring life back to our communion bread. If every Episcopal church were to source their communion bread from a sustainable farm, like grains like Jesus would have eaten, we could sequester 100 million pounds of carbon dioxide every year. So it's something that the church could actually do practically to address climate change, and any church can do this. Any church can participate. What I continue to hear again and again is the deep hunger people have for this kind of work and for this kind of relating to one another that's both real and it's also joyful.
And what better way to follow that call to go is to see where the joy and the wonder is.
I think it grounds us. It's you've got your feet on the ground, you're not looking at your phone, you're actually hearing the sound of the cutting.
Yes, I can hear it right now.
People have said this is so therapeutic. That brings out our heart and this connection that people have. We have time to stop.
Someone mentioned that in those moments when we're out here sweating, because this is not easy work at all, that there's something holy in that. And we're alone in our thoughts. we're with God, really then our guard is down to let God in. Have you found that to be true in your ministry?
Absolutely. This is a very incarnational ministry. In communion bread, we hold up a piece of bread or a wafer and we say, this is the body of Christ.
Yeah.
But there's also a material aspect to that. That is our theological maxim, but there's a biological truth. Is that wafer coming from the industrial food supply?
Sure.
Or is that coming from a sustainable source? We consume this bread and it becomes us. It becomes our eyes and our hands. So in a way, God is within us, and that the reverence that we offer changes us.
What a gift.
And we change the land.
The Gospel of Mark recounts that an angel tells the women at the tomb that Jesus had been raised from the dead. He says, "He is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." When we go on the way of love, whether it's across the street or around the globe, Jesus has already gone ahead of us, filling the world with his justice, love, and truth. When we go beyond our circles and comforts, into the highways and hedges and farms and cities, we're sure to find him along the way.